This video is sponsored by Chepeku. It's Monster Week. It's a D&D community event created by Pointy Hat and Ginny D, and for the past few days, the entire Dungeon Tuber community has been making videos about the Fae. These videos are in some playlists in the description. Go check them out. There are some real bangers this year. And I actually had two videos I wanted to make about this topic. Earlier this week, I made a character creation video where the character was a changeling. Not in the D&D sense, but in the folklore terms. Someone who had been replaced as a baby by a Fae. But I also wanted to talk about the current Fae-centric storyline I've got going on in my game. I think it would be the perfect discussion for this year's Monster Week. However, this year it's been a little bit difficult to try to get multiple videos out every week. Things have just been a little bit crazy over the past couple of months. In fact, when I'm trying so hard to get multiple videos out in a week, sometimes it feels like I have to take some drastic measures.
My name is Granny Hemlock. And if you really would be willing to give anything for a week with no distractions, then perhaps you'd like to make a deal.
Now, I know, making a deal with a hag, not a great idea. I'm sure there are some other videos in some of those Fae Week playlists that are all about that topic. Putting hags in your game, making deals with them, all that stuff. And that actually reminds me of what's been going on in my current campaign, because in my recent games, my players have just pissed off a hag by breaking a deal they made with her, and it has not gone well for them since. And as a result, this recurring hag character suddenly became the big bad for our current story arc. And I'm especially excited to talk about that because I've been making videos about running shorter stories in your D&D games, structuring your campaign as a series of seasons, having rotating villains serving as the big bad at any given time. And in fact, we had just basically started a different quest tracking down these magic shields, and I was expecting the party to be dealing with another faction who's also looking for those shields. As far as I was concerned, we were in the shield season, and this other faction was our current big bad. But then my players pissed off a hag, and now we're in the middle of that storyline as she's trying to take her revenge on them, and they're trying to outfox her. I don't normally do campaign diaries on this channel, but I would love to tell you just a little bit about what's been going on behind the scenes, because I think it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully you can see how I've been taking all these lessons I've been discussing through my videos this year, and I've been putting them into action in my own campaign. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, all that really helps me out a lot, and make sure to go check out the other Monster Week videos after you're done with this one, and see what else we've got going on. Now, on with the show. First of all, I want to tell you how this whole Fae-centric storyline actually started, several levels earlier. See, in our second adventure ever, the players were sent to clear out a haunted castle, except it wasn't filled with ghosts, it was instead filled with various types of Fae. The castle was meant to be used as a base of operations for a logging company that was entering the region, and this angry Fae came and carved up the humans and used them for all the things we use plants for in our own world. They used the humans as firewood, to build furniture, they rolled cigars out of them. It was grotesque, very deliberately so. And the main villain was called the Carpenter, and he was a vile barber, a Fae from the Kobold Press book Tome of Beasts 1. My players fought some redcaps, they fought some ghosts of murdered loggers, they met a satyr who's just here to enjoy a vacation and wasn't really involved in any of the murder, and we'll talk more about that another day because some of my players definitely have a different expectation of what this satyr is capable of because they've been watching Legend of Vox Machina, and so I need to start avoiding tropes from that campaign because my players are becoming aware of them in a roundabout way, but we'll discuss that another time. That'll be a future video. But along the way, throughout the castle, they've also found a hag who was being forced to bind flesh books in the library. She was trapped by the Carpenter's magic, and she wanted the players to free her. She was actually able to give the players a long rest before their final fight, where they could sleep in safety in exchange for a favor that she would collect at a future date. She also gave them some decent information about some of the other Fae in the castle, including the final boss. They got up to the top level of the castle, they fought and killed the Carpenter, they fought his bodyguards and killed them. He also had a Dryad companion who used her tree abilities to escape. She was the spellcaster in that final fight, but there was a tree growing up through the center of the castle, so she was able to enter the tree, travel down to the ground floor, and get out of the building before the players could catch up with her. When the Carpenter was killed, the magic that was trapping these other creatures in the castle was broken, so the hag was able to leave. There's also a quickling in one of the other rooms. They hadn't fought it or even seen it yet. They only heard that there was a very fast creature in the trophy room, but with the magic broken and the Carpenter dead, the quickling just left. Like, why stay and fight for someone who's dead? And maybe it was just trapped there, so why remain? It left. Anyway, I should have seen this part coming, but then the players claimed this castle as their own keep. They still haven't actually taken advantage of that yet. They haven't come back for a long rest ever since because they've been just running around the valley, and also it still needs a deep cleaning, probably an exorcism as well, but their goal is to make this castle their home base. Cut forward 4 or 5 levels, and the players are on their way to find one of these magic shields, and along the way they have an encounter with some lycanthropes. Literally just a random encounter, although they didn't come completely out of nowhere. I do know where they reside on the map. I knew they existed in this forest somewhere. It just Happened they came up in a random encounter chart. And our ranger got bitten by a werewolf, and they wanted to find some way to break that curse. And they have to do that before the ranger gets knocked unconscious again, because that's when he'll finally succumb to the curse. That's how the curse works in D&D 2024. Now, I don't like the remove curse spell being used on werewolf bites, but I still wanted to make sure the players have some option to remove the curse, and I knew I could use that other option to steer the players towards another adventure. So as they were traveling through the forest, trying to find a cure, they came across the hag's hut. And once again, they met with Ms. Melancholy. And she promised she could provide a cure. But the ranger actually didn't want a cure, he just wanted some way that could keep him in control of his own mind. That's the cool thing about this character. They used to have this past serving as an unwilling pawn in an evil scheme, where his will was taken away from him, and he didn't want to go through that again. For him, getting turned into a werewolf was not as devastating as the idea of losing control of his autonomy. That was something he would not be okay with. It was kind of a perfect symbolic moment, because I didn't intend for this to represent his own anxieties, but it worked out really well that way. And so she gave him a ring that's basically like a ring of mind shielding, just a little bit different. And it'll help keep the ranger keep control over his own mind if he does transform. However, the players still owed the hag a favor, and she now wanted something in exchange for this deal for the ring, so through some negotiation, she settled on the form of payment that would clear the party of all their debts with her. She wanted them to head into the Swamp of Revelation, into the Temple of the Doom Speaker, and liberate her sister, who was trapped inside. The players entered, they fought some monsters, and found some interesting treasure, but when they found where her sister was trapped, she was imprisoned inside a sarcophagus and being watched over by a Cyclops, whose mission was to keep her from escaping. Because there are some Cyclopses who can see the future, and this Cyclops was given a mission to prevent an apocalypse from coming to pass. A Cyclops seer who predicted that if the three hag sisters were brought together again, it would lead to devastation for the valley, the end of this civilization as they know it. So the players decide, okay, well, we can't fulfill this quest, so we have to go kill Ms. Melancholy, the hag who sent us on this mission. So the bard used one of his favors from a genie to send the genie off to go get the hag and bring her back. After all, the genie could plane shift. I'd remember that was a power that genies had from a previous campaign. So we could just go into the elemental plane of fire and then re-emerge at the hag's hut, grab her, drag her back into the plane of fire, and bring her back here. I have since realized that they can't cast plane shift that often, and I imagine you probably have to be willing to go with someone when they cast plane shift on you, but whatever. I didn't remember any of that at the time, so based on the information that I gave my players in that session, they came up with a really interesting plan, and again, at the time, I didn't see any reason they couldn't at least try to make it happen. And after a brief detour where my players wound up sending the genie to instead get an awesome magic weapon, and they got the Sword of Cass, I talked about that in this video up here, but then they went ahead with their plan. They sent the genie to go get the hag, and after I rolled behind the screen several times, tried to figure out how it was going, eventually the genie emerged back into the dungeon with the hag grappled in his arms, and the genie had taken quite a lot of damage, all of its psychic damage from the Phantasmal Killer spell. The players immediately dropped a silence spell on top of the hag, and they tried to attack her, but they weren't prepared for her, and this is when I realized that my players just think she's an old woman. It had honestly never even occurred to me that my players had no idea hags are not human. So when she's taking these pretty significant hits and not going down and actually scratching the hell out of people in melee range, they were very surprised. So I made sure there was a moment during this fight where her visage seemed to shift for a moment, and just for a second they saw her with purple skin and horns, and they started to realize, oh, we don't know anything about this woman. And then she ran into the corner of the room, out of the zone of silence, and she said, "You chose this fight very well. I will do the same." She was telling them, I'm going to come for you. I'm going to ambush you next time. And then she plane shifted away. And the moment this hag vanished, my players knew they were fucked. This hag was going to come after them seeking revenge. And I was so proud of my players for what happened next, because they immediately said, we need to figure out where she's going and what she's going to do next. This is a clear sign that they really understood the stakes of letting her go off on her own, and they needed to get out in front of it. It is honestly so rewarding when your players generate their own quests, because they're actually taking the world of the game seriously. They understand the stakes of what will happen if they don't do something now. And they also understand that what they're trying to do can be achieved. It's a really perfect middle ground. It worked out so well. The players asked the Cyclops where she might go next, and he said he did not know. And they pressed him on that a little bit. After all, he knew what was going to happen if all the other hags got free and worked together and became a coven once again. So can't he know what's going to happen next? Can't he know where she's going? And he clarified, well, I don't see the future. I was given a prophecy. Okay, in hindsight, I actually understand why they thought he was the one with the gift of foresight. I was given a prophecy does sound quite a lot like I saw the future, but really the Cyclops received the prophecy. Okay, same problem. So the Cyclops clarified there is an oracle who told him this prophecy, who said that he had to watch over this hag, and told him what would happen if he failed. And before I could even get the next sentence out of my mouth, my wife jumped in and said, well, could we go see the oracle? Bingo. That's exactly what I was hoping they were going to say next. To be fair, none of this was planned. I had not known the hag was going to get away. I thought, honestly, if they had rolled better, and the Cyclops had rolled well at all, she could have died right there. But as we're talking about this and they're trying to figure out what to do next, this quest was developing organically out of their desire to try to figure out what Ms. Melancholy was going to do to them. I was generating this quest in real time, realizing that they could probably, go back and talk to the Oracle who had assigned the Cyclops with his mission. What was so cool is that I only had just started putting down a little bit of information about what possible option there was, just barely hinting at the Oracle, and before I could even make it clear that that was going to be the next quest, my players picked up on it and asked for it to be the next quest, in not so many words, but close enough. Because they had a really clear goal, and so any clue I gave to them that was hinting towards something that could help solve that problem, resolve that goal, they were immediately latching onto it. It's the least amount of work I've ever had to do to set up an adventure that I was still generating myself. It was so awesome. So they traveled to the location where they could meet the Oracle, they had to pass a challenge first and fight some monsters and basically a holodeck, and I gave the justification that the Oracle needed to basically see them fight before she could see their futures, because once she saw how they interact with the world and how they take on challenges, she could better predict their future. I'm sure my players saw right through that. It was probably extremely transparent, but the fight itself was fun. They fought a Chimera and a Hydra, and once again, my wife was the MVP. She remembered how Hercules actually beat the Hydra in the myth, and that information led my players to victory. Slightly longer story. I might tell that more in the future video. I might be working on a video about DM styles, kind of piggybacking off of what Matt Colville's video was about, the latest video that he made. But my video is going to be probably coming out in a couple of months later this year. I'm going to save that story for that video. Mainly because it's not the point of today's story, but also partially because there's something I did in that story that I know some of you out there will take issue with. You will say that I'm running the game wrong, and that's because it's about GM style. And before we do anything that contentious, we'll talk about that in that video. But once my players beat the monsters, they met with the Oracle, and they were told their future. The next time they go back to their keep and take a long rest in that safe place, Ms. Melancholy is going to attack them in their sleep and kill them. But she's not going to do it alone. She's going out looking for reinforcements right now. Specifically, she's going to recruit the Fae that escaped from the castle, the Dryad and the Quickling. Those two are still somewhere loose in the material plane, in the forest, presumably. But I also knew that I wanted there to be some sort of physical threat, some sort of warrior who could pose a challenge in battle. So the Oracle also told them that she was heading into the Feywild to recruit a warrior from the Hall of the Green. What is the Hall of the Green? I have no idea. I made it up right there on the spot. I think I was inspired by the concept of the green in DC Comics. It's something that connects characters like Swamp Thing, characters who have these magical plant-based powers. But I've never read any comics that feature the green. It's something I picked up through osmosis whenever those comics have been recommended to me. In fact, the only reason that the term even occurred to me is probably because I'd happened to be watching a lot of comic book YouTube in the week leading up to that session for totally unrelated reasons, just recreationally. Had I been watching something else in the days leading up to that game, the location of the warrior might have been called something completely different, like a Fallout reference or something, I don't know. But in that moment, I didn't know what the Hall of Green actually was, but I knew that I had a location. I had this vague sense that this could maybe be some sort of warrior training ground, someplace that mortals could actually learn how to fight with Fey weapons or magic or something like that, but that's all I had, just that nugget of an idea. But I knew this is something that I could work with. It was a good starting point. I didn't know what the Hall of the Green was in that session, but I didn't need to know. I could figure it out between games. But that's where my players were going next. They had a clear location, the Hall of the Green, where they knew the hag would be going. So they were going to head straight there. Now, leading up to that next session, I was racking my brain to try to figure out what the Hall of the Green actually was. After all, this is presumably where there's going to be some sort of combat encounter, so I needed to make sure I knew more about the location so I could then map it out. But then I realized I could do it the other way around. I could find a map that I liked and let that tell me what the Hall of the Green actually is. So I went and used today's sponsor, Cheipeku. That's right, this video is sponsored by Cheipeku, which is perfect because I genuinely did use Cheipeku when prepping this session. See, Cheipeku was one of the best map makers in the industry. I am completely blown away by all the maps they make, and the fact that they're putting out new ones every week. They have an incredible output and an incredible selection, and you can sort through their entire roster by location. So let's say you know your players are going to the Feywild. Well, you can go to the maps page and type in Fey, and you'll get a roster of every single map in their collection that can take place in the Fey. And the team at Cheipeku also uploads variants of every single map, changing the time of day, removing certain landmarks like trees or bridges, adding environmental effects like fog or magic portals, changing out the surrounding environment entirely. These maps are so incredibly versatile, and so there are some maps that aren't originally set in the Feywild, but they have a Fey variant, so you have this really fantastic selection. And so I browsed through all the Fey tagged maps, and I found this map of the flooded Fey ruins, and it felt like the perfect location where a warrior could be training, but where we could also get an important fight where positioning matters a whole lot. So when we got to the session, I drew out this map for my players on my own battle mat, but there were some aspects of the mat that I didn't do a good job of communicating due to my own limited map drawing tools. But fortunately, I could not only show them the digital version to help them better imagine the terrain, but I could also show them what the scene looked like from their perspective, because several of Chepeku's maps also come with a scene, which shows what it actually looks like for the player characters. And in this case, the scene is actually animated, so you can see the leaves swaying in the breeze. It's so cool. And it genuinely helped my players look at my chicken scratch drawing in the middle of the table, and they could look at the scene and go, oh, I see. Okay, now I can picture where we are. Now I understand the Hall of the Green. And if you visit go.chepeku.com/supergeekmike, you can save 50% off your first order. Once again, that is go.chepeku.com/supergeekmike, link in the description to save 50% off your first order. Thanks so much to Chepeku for sponsoring this video. Now, at this point in the video, if you happen to be one of my players and you haven't stopped watching already, now's the time where I'm going to ask you to stop watching the video until the hag storyline is over. You can come back to it then. We're going to start talking about things that I had to work out before our most recent session, not all of which has paid off yet. So if you're part of that group, stop watching now. Okay, now that we're safe, and I know my players won't get spoiled, let's proceed. So once I knew what was going to happen next, it was time for me to start figuring out some stat blocks. After all, the Dryad and the Quickling were meant to be encounters when the players were only level 2. Now they're level 7. I needed something much more substantial. Additionally, I needed a stat block for the Warrior. Originally, I was going to go through the process of remaking all these stat blocks and trying to build a brand new team of bad guys. But then I realized there is a team that already fits my purposes in a book I already own. So I went to my copy of Flea Mortals and I checked out the villain groups from the back of the book. And one of those villain groups is called the Wilderkith. They're basically the D&D equivalent of a group of eco-terrorists. But their party includes a Dryad, a Nymph, a Warrior, a big tree guy, and an Archer. I love the lore behind this team, and I would love to use them at some point in a future campaign exactly the way they're written. But for right now, I already have a really strong plot hook for this evil team that seeks revenge on my party. I don't need all the other villain backstories. I just need to adapt this group to fit my own purposes. The team already includes a Dryad. That's perfect. There's also an Elven Warrior, someone from the mortal world who runs with this group of mostly Fae. And once again, that's perfect. I can use them as the warrior that my players are looking for in the Hall of the Green. I could replace the Nymph with the Night Hag. They're not exactly one for one, but my players were literally told who would be in this party by an oracle who could see the future, and a Nymph was not mentioned. Plus, she's basically a spellcaster, and so is the Hag, so I feel comfortable making that swap, even if mechanically it makes no sense from a balance perspective, but it works for the story. For the Quickling, well, they never actually saw it. I have free reign to do whatever I want with that character. I just told them there was a very fast Fae. So I think I could replace the Quickling with the spooky masked Archer. I'll just give the Archer extra movement speed, maybe an extra arrow shot every turn. Maybe I'll make it smaller to make it still fit with the Quickling. If they see one in a future campaign, they'll kind of know that it's the same creature. But it'll still feel like they're fighting a very fast Fae that I warned them about in that prophecy. And the big tree guy, well, I think I can make him a companion of the Dryad. After all, she also swore revenge on the party the last time they saw her, so she would be going out there and making her own friends. Literally. She made a friend. She probably grew this tree guy. Now, why didn't the Oracle mention the tree guy? Well, that's something that I know I can justify if my players ask about it. I'm not worried about that. In fact, something happened in the last session. It's going to make it even easier to justify the tree guy when he does show up, to explain why he wasn't part of the prophecy, but he still shows up in the fight. And I can make that make sense really easily, but we'll get there in a second. Now, you might ask, can't I just find some way to justify the Nymph in the same way? But I don't need another spellcaster since I have the Hag and the Dryad, but I do need another Bruiser. Well, I don't need another Bruiser. I want one. I have very strong feelings about what makes for a good party dynamic, and I'll definitely have to talk more about those in some future videos. But that's the team. An Elven Warrior, a Dryad, a Night Hag, a very fast Archer, and a Tree Guy. I really like that dynamic. I like that arrangement of monsters. I don't need anybody else. That works for me. So my players got to the Feywild, and that was a whole series of shenanigans, which I'll omit for today's purposes because they're not relevant. But then they actually met with the warrior, Tuval Uthriar, and they warned him that Ms. Melancholy is coming to recruit him to kill them. And he admits he made a deal with this hag a long time ago. He owes her a favor. And so he tells them that if she asks for this favor, he cannot refuse. It brings him no joy to kill the heroes, but he is bound to honor their contract. Now, I had no idea what my players were going to do when they got here, but their immediate first move was to negotiate with him, to try to get him on their side to kill the hag. And I told my players, okay, we're going to enter a skill challenge. You're going to need to make your pitch to him, and you're going to need 3 successful persuasion checks. And if you get 3 successes before 3 failures, he'll be in favor of your plan, and he'll want to help you. If you fail 3 times, you will not be able to convince him to help you in this fight. So the players made their arguments. What if we cast silence on you so you can't hear the hag make her offer? They roll, they fail. So he says that's a great idea, but she could dispel it. Can any of you keep her from dispelling magic? Not only is this a way to open up a new potential argument for them to make, so they can try to roll again, but also it was the first of many hints throughout the session my players really need to get their hands on some counterspell. My players have not realized yet that at least one of them does have access to it, but he hasn't taken it as a spell. They don't know it's one of the best spells in the game, and they don't know that without that spell, I don't know if they're going to be able to kill this hag, because she's always going to try to plane shift away. They make a few more offers trying to solidify their plan, but whenever they rolled poorly, I would have Tuval point out a hole in their plan. Now, if they'd rolled successfully, he would be still bringing up these holes, but in a helpful way, try to make the plan more secure. Like, okay, that's a great idea. You can cast silence on me. The only downside is that she is going to try to dispel it, so we have to figure out how we're going to solve that problem. That's what he would have said in response. It's the same answer, let's fix this plan, or your plan is flawed at least, but with it more of an emphasis on working together, working with them, leading to a more productive conversation. Because they were failing, it was essentially difficult for them to convince him that they could kill her. So he was just better off joining her and killing them when he was asked to do so, because he didn't believe in their chances to gang up on her and kill her. And unfortunately for my players, they used up like 4 natural 20s during their shenanigans at the beginning of the session, so now they could just not clear a DC 15 persuasion check. So when they got to their third failure, the hag arrived and called out to collect her debt, demanding Tuval Uthriar kill the party. She was hiding in the bushes somewhere, but now they were dealing with a very powerful warrior and a spellcaster in the bushes. But also this warrior had an awesome magic item that could hit them with a cone of fire on round 1. And because I was using this really cool map from today's sponsor, they were literally all lined up perfectly for that cone. They all got hit. So the fight began, and from the bushes somewhere, the hag called out, "I don't know how you got here. I don't know how you figured out where I was going, but it's fine. The 2 of us can kill you here." I wanted to acknowledge the fact that they had successfully already disrupted her plan. They showed up at the first location she went to in order to recruit her team. Even though this fight was going to be difficult, it was already going to be so much easier because my players were proactive about it. But also, this fight was difficult. It got pretty dicey there for a while, but fortunately the bard was able to use heat metal to cook Tuval inside his armor, and he died. With his final words, he expressed regret that he didn't think they could kill the hag, but he still doesn't think they can. But he wished he did believe in them, because he would have liked to fight alongside them instead of against them. And unfortunately, he just didn't think they could do it. He still doesn't, but he wishes things could have gone a different way. And he was dead. And Ms. Melancholy was furious, and she disappeared into another reality on her mission to go find more allies to hunt the heroes. The players cast Speak with Dead on Tuval to try to find out what weaknesses she has, and he once again urges them to just go find a scroll of counterspell. Obviously, I didn't want an NPC to turn to one of the players and say, "It's on your spell list, dummy." It doesn't line up with how much information I think most NPCs would have anyway, but also it doesn't feel good for that player to hear that, to hear a character say, "Hey, idiot, you could have saved my life." But now they've been told, this is what you need to get before you fight her again, because if you don't, she's going to keep vanishing at the end of every fight. So at the end of the session, Ms. Melancholy was still on the loose and on her way to recruit the Dryad and the Quickling. And the big tree guy will be part of that as well. That was already part of the plan, but now it'll be even better justified because of the fact that my players just have started disrupting the plan. That means that the plan is going to have to adapt. The prophecy's not going to play out the exact same way now. They've already changed their fates quite a bit by killing Tuval and by ambushing Ms. Melancholy, even though it wasn't successful. I'm not going to have Ms. Melancholy totally abandon her plan because she doesn't know how the players found Tuval. She doesn't know how much they know. But she's definitely going to be a lot more careful next time. But also, Ms. Melancholy has escaped twice, with a very clear goal to hunt the heroes down and kill them. She is absolutely the most memorable villain from this campaign so far, and it's not even close. Not even the Azures who killed a player character have been as threatening to the heroes as Ms. Melancholy is. And whatever happens next is almost certainly going to be epic. And my favorite part is that I didn't just drop a villain in front of my players. They made a deal with her, and then they broke that deal. And now they're facing the consequences. I don't really know what's going to happen next, but I do know that Ms. Melancholy wants something very clear. She wants to kill the heroes. I don't know how she plans to get it. She's going to recruit some allies and go ambush the heroes next time she gets a chance. So right now, the big question is, what are the players going to do to try to stop her? So, yeah, I can totally understand why people might think it's a bad idea for me to make a deal with a hag. Look, I just want a nice, normal week where I can work on my videos without all these other distractions. Every week, some wacky new character pops up, and it's a whole thing. We've had a procrastination witch, an angel, a pirate, a mermaid, an evil doppelganger of me, a demon, and worst of all, a cop. I just need 1 week where I'm not dealing with some new monster of the week causing chaos.
I can help arrange that.
Thank you. except this week is almost over, and you are one of those wacky monsters of the week. Making a deal with you to get a monster of the week free week doesn't make any sense. You're still popping up in this episode and distracting me. You can't make this week monster of the week free because you're here.
Fair enough. But I can help with next week's videos.
You can.
Of course. I agree. These new monsters of the week are distracting you from what you really should be focused on. And if all you're looking for is a week where you can just focus on making content, I can help make sure that happens. I can keep the monsters of the week away from you for a week. Give you a break from all of these distractions.
Okay, but let's be really clear about our terms. This does not apply to, like, my family or my friends. I don't want you to pull some hag bullshit like, okay, you wanted me to get rid of distractions, and since having a child is distracting, I abducted your child and forced them to spin gold or whatever the fuck. I don't want you to be like, oh, your family distracts you, so I'm going to send your wife away on a work trip next week. I'm a hag. I'm calling your wife a monster of the week. Aren't I edgy?
Your wife does have a work trip next week.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. I want to make sure we're really clear about our terms. When I talk about getting rid of distractions, I specifically mean the magical cartoon characters who keep popping up in my videos every week this year.
I will not disrupt your personal life outside of the videos in any way. All I will do is make sure that no monsters of the week appear in next week's videos.
Okay. Okay, great.
All I would ask in exchange is a favor to be collected at some point in the future.
I don't want to hurt anybody.
I wouldn't ask you to. Now, do we have a deal?
So that's the deal I made. Just 1 week without a monster of the week distracting me from making videos. That's all I asked for. Honestly, I think that's a pretty fair request. I'm not going to be asked to do anything crazy. Don't worry, this is all going to be totally fine. So join me next week when I'm going to get 2 videos out, and neither of them are going to be plagued by a monster of the week. It's going to be great. Thanks so much for watching. You can also look forward to next week a Patreon live stream, time on screen. That's going to be on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure you check your current calendar and current conversion for the time zone. And I will see you there. We're going to talk a little bit more about just, whatever else. I'll answer questions from the audience. I should collect some questions. This weekend, if you're a patron, make sure to look for a post that's going to be collecting questions. If you can't make the live stream in person, I will answer questions for people who won't be able to attend, but still want to have, their questions addressed. New videos coming next week. Going to be very excited. There should be a new Critical Role Demystified out next week, if all goes according to plan. Which, of course it will, because I'm going to have a week with no distractions, right? That's what we established. Other than that, things are good. So, until next time. Oh, watch this video. Watch the video right here. If you didn't watch my video from yesterday, the other Monster Week video I made about changelings. Well, not changelings in the D&D sense, but in the sort of fae sense from folklore and mythology, and how you can maybe play one in your game. Check that video out right here. Until next time, play fair. And have fun. Have fae! Have fae!